It was a few minutes before 7 o'clock on the evening of October 12th when the phone rang in the Ford suburban Alexandria home. "Dad," shouted 16-year-old Susan Ford, "the White House is calling." There was not much time to ponder the presidential offer. This, by the way, was the first Mrs. Ford had heard. They had less than 2 hours to dress and get themselves over to the East Room of the White House for a nationally televised announcement concerning the vice presidency. Far more revealing than anything he said that night in the East Room was what the vice president designate did the next day, away from the cameras. And you have to remember, Richard Nixon was made for television. I mean, this ongoing part Shakespeare, part soap opera, culminating in the image that we will always remember on August 9th, 1974. He from Checkers to the Frost interviews to his funeral, Richard Nixon was made for television. Gerald Ford wasn't. Gerald Ford's best moments invariably came off camera, and this is one of them. The day after he is nominated to be Vice President of the United States, without fanfare or entourage, he flew home to Cedar Springs, Michigan, the self-professed red flannel manufacturing capital of the world, to march in the annual Red Flannel Day parade. It was a telling gesture. Wherever he might be headed, Ford had no intention of forgetting where he came from. I once asked him, because we've all seen the images on August 9th. It's a curious thing. Stop and think. Whenever another anniversary rolls around, August 8th, August 9th, have you noticed how the media all say it's the blank anniversary of Nixon's departure? Very rarely do they say it's the blank anniversary of the Ford presidency. Richard Nixon owns those days in our memory. Because of the drama, the tragedy, the Shakespearean nature of what was going on, but also because Gerald Ford wasn't the sort to monopolize the media's attention. But I always wondered what happened on the walk back into the White House. And the president-to-be, said exactly the right thing. He knew Mrs. Ford was not happy about what was happening. They had just walked out to the helicopter. Pat Nixon said, "Oh, look, Betty, a red carpet. You'll get so sick of red carpets." And they kissed, and what could they say? But Mrs. Ford was really in turmoil. This had all happened too fast. And maybe she was naive, but like the rest of the Ford family, she really believed up until the very last moment that this wasn't going to happen. So anyway, Gerald Ford understood that before he could even hope to rally the country, reassure the country, he had to begin by reassuring his wife. And if you look at their images as they walk back into the White House, the president leans over in her ear and whispers, "We can do it." Perfect. If his words that day were pitch perfect, his instincts remained Grand Rapids modest. Only the strenuous objections of its author, Robert Hartman, dissuaded the new president from excising the most memorable line of his 8-minute inaugural address and thereby diluting the contrast between himself and his disgraced predecessor. "Our long national nightmare is over," remained in the text. Ford wanted to cut it out. He thought it was a little rough on Nixon. Trifling in itself, the incident points up a generosity of spirit which could easily be taken for naivete. It hints at the congressional mindset, wherein the art of persuasion involves dozens instead of millions, and workhorses thrive outside the spotlight while show horses play to the crowd. The most successful presidents, you think Jackson, Lincoln, the Roosevelts, Truman, Reagan, they're historical stage managers, narrators of their own morality play, in which they battle forces of greed, social injustice, or foreign menace. They are brilliant self-dramatizers. Gerald Ford would never be that kind of president, nor is Oliver Stone ever likely to make a movie about this un-Nixon, whom journalist David Broder labeled the least neurotic president I've ever known. Equally grounded was the Ford family, as demonstrated in another exchange that occurred out of sight of the ubiquitous cameras banked outside their Alexandria home on the night of August 9th. They're in the kitchen, and Mrs. Ford is slaving over a pan of lasagna. And she says, "Jerry, there's something wrong here. I'm still cooking, and you're president of the United States." It's even now hard to conceive of what an acceleration of history took place, really just in a few days, in August of 1974. Remember, this is a man who's had very little preparation for what is about to descend on him, and no transition. He could not appear to believe for a moment that he might be president, let alone be preparing to be president, because, of course, that was politically out of the question. One of the first people who was hired around the White House was a man named Don Penny. This book that David Kennelly and I have collaborated on, that's about to be published, features a number of new interviews with people, and in fact, extensive interviews with President Ford. And one of the best is Don Penny, who was an old writer for Steve Allen, who came in to kind of punch up the president's speeches and teach him kind of how to work the television camera. His first advice was, you have to be Fred Astaire in this job. You have to start learning how to tap dance. Well, forget Fred Astaire. 6 weeks into the job, Ford was dancing as fast as he could. Late in September, the president interrupted a White House summit on the economy to reveal his wife's successful breast cancer surgery. A new cabinet had to be recruited, including the likes of Ed Levy, Carla Hills, Frank Zarb, Bill Ussery, and William Coleman. The latter, the first African-American cabinet officer to serve a Republican president. An innovative economic policy board was established to help guide the administration in its two-front war on inflation and unemployment. The month before Gerald Ford became president, 1 month, July 1974, guess what the inflation rate was? For the month, 3.7%. Everything seemed urgent. There was energy policy to devise and sell to Congress and the country, trips to Japan and China, the heartbreak of America's final days in Vietnam, and the recoil of the Mayaguez incident in neighboring Cambodia, delicate talks over arms control and increased immigration of Soviet Jews, the Apollo-Soyuz joint space mission, and the perennial headache of the Middle East. The Fords hosted no fewer than 33 state visits, many linked to the nation's bicentennial celebration. Add the tumultuous contest for the 1976 Republican presidential nomination, a crisis over court-ordered school busing in Boston, the uproar over a botched campaign to fight swine flu, IRAs and ATMs and Title IX, a 10-day European tour encouraging Democratic forces in several Iron Curtain satellites, a pair of assassination attempts, and the running battle between congressional spenders and a veto-wielding executive. Suddenly, the Ford years can be seen for what they were, a time of immense and accelerating change as America struggled to redefine its post-Vietnam mission and to regain a sense of institutional trust, all but wrecked by the war and Watergate.